Welcome back, guys. Week 5 of the season is in the books, and we have won the Clash of Conferences as we bested the Buffalo Bills. Before we get started, remember to like, comment, subscribe, turn those notifications down below. Let's get straight into talking about how this game went down. After 4 quarters of action, Buffalo was just not able to keep up with us as we defeated the Bills by a score of 56-26. Early in this one, they relied on big plays to stick with us, but we performed better overall, so let's go through the story of this game to see how we got the victory. We would get the ball first, meaning it would be Kyler Murray who would lead the opening drive, and he would go on to have a good day as a passer as he would end up throwing for 220 yards and 3 touchdowns. This drive would not go without opposition, however, as it would be the all-pro linebacker Matt Milano who would fly in off the snap and drop Murray for the sack in the red zone. And this was the statement piece of a very impressive showing by him, as he would end up with 11 total tackles and an additional TFL as well. But we would wipe it away on the very next play as we would look to our veteran back, James Conner, and he would take the ball and power across the goal line to give us the first score of the game. And this would be just the start of a phenomenal day from him, which we will further discuss throughout. We would then kick the ball to Buffalo, and the explosive plays came immediately as a perfectly ran screen call for Nyheim Hines allows him to burst away for 62 yards, and with that, just one play, they found themselves already into the red zone. And that very next play, they would hand the ball off to Damian Harris, and he would break one tackle from Thomas and then go the rest of the way to find the end zone and bring this game right back even at a score apiece. Then, we would get the ball back, and that is when we would decide to focus our efforts towards our young star tight end, Trey McBride. Just like always, McBride stayed a reliable option for Murray, which would allow him to bring in 6 balls for a yard under 80, and he would cap off the drive, bringing this one to put us right back on top by a touchdown margin. The following kickoff would bring out the Buffalo offense once more, who was obviously led out by their franchise quarterback, Josh Allen, and he arguably had an even better day than Murray as a passer, as he would throw for over 300 yards with 2 scores through the air, and he had no interceptions for the entirety of the game. The drive would end in a field goal, so we would get the ball back, but we'd face our own faults just 2 plays later, as we would meet one half of their pass rushing threat in Greg Rousseau, as McBride did not get enough of a block in on Rousseau and ended with Murray in the dirt. We then moved into the second quarter, 2 plays later, and we would make this huge connection with KJ Hamler, but the ball would come out at the end of it, and Taron Johnson would scoop it up to secure the takeaway for the Bills. But the officials would put this into replay review, and they determined Hamler was already down, so the fumble call would be negated. So then, a few plays later, as we neared the end zone, we would end up throwing to none other than our superstar receiver, Hollywood Brown, and a beautiful connection on the back corner of the end zone gave us a gorgeous catch for yet another touchdown score, and that is why having a guy like Hollywood is so special. Buffalo would follow us up with a huge 3-and-out, and then we would make a huge mistake on the next drive, as it would be Brandon Jones who would snag the ball away, taking advantage of a poor throw from Murray, and would secure the interception for Buffalo. They would follow this with another 3-and-out, and we would also be set to punt on 4th down, but the Bills special teams would make contact with Hawk, drawing a roughing the punter call, and save us the drive. So we would extend into the 2-minute warning, and it would be James Conner who would get on the end of a screen pass, and he would power through contact once more to get across the goal line for his second touchdown score of the game to put us up by 3 scores. They would go 3-and-out for their attempt at the 2-minute drill, and so we would get our chance at it, and Kyler Murray's legs would become vital to our success, as he would scramble out for his massive play to get us into scoring range, and then he would do it again here, and he would put his body on the line as he would take to the sky, as he would dive for the goal line, and he would get met in the air, but he would get the ball just far enough forward as the officials would signal touchdown, moving our point total to 35. That would bring us to the second half, and with Buffalo starting with the ball, they would look to focus on involving Kendrick Bourne. He's been a solid contributor for years with both New England and San Francisco, and in this game, he would spearhead this drive as he would end up bringing in 5 balls for a yard under 50. That drive would end with a field goal, and we would go 3-and-out. And then we saw one of the wildest plays in quite some time as they would give the ball to Harris. He would get into the pile and he would go down on top of another player, so he was not marked down. The ball would pop out, and it would be their left guard, Brady Christensen, who would scoop it up and get into the end zone for a touchdown. But after another replay review, they determined Harris was down before the ball came out, so another fumble was called back against them. But they would get that touchdown right back because just a few plays later, it would be Dalton Kincaid, the second-year tight end who Allen would find in the end zone as he boxed out a defender to keep their hopes alive in this game. They would then attempt to go for two, and they would go back to Bourne, but it would be Marco Wilson who would make the huge pass breakup to prevent the two-point try. And it would get even worse for Buffalo because on that following kickoff, it would be our return specialist Andre Bocelli who would bring in the ball on the one and would take it all the way back 99 yards for the score, and that would move our advantage even further up to 23. The bad breaks continued to come for the Bills, as after they would drive all the way into field goal range, and as Allen would decide to scramble, he would break away from Ojulari, but he could not escape Bryce Huff as he would get rocked, causing a fumble, and it would be none other than the rookie defensive tackle, Lonnie Johnson, who would dive on top of the loose ball, and that would get us that ball right back as we near the end of the quarter. But the momentum would move back the way of Buffalo, as when we entered the fourth quarter, we would see Kyler Murray's second big mistake come, as his throw for Hollywood would drift too far upfield, and it would be Taron Johnson who would come away with the second Buffalo interception of the day, and it was at just the time they needed it. But this is when our pass rush would take over, as BJ Ojulari would not be shorted his production again, as he would clean up an escaping Allen on the outside for our first sack of the entire game, and then on this third down to force the punt. Nothing would open up downfield despite Allen attempting to extend it, and Ojulari would get in for yet another sack. Oh, and in between those two sacks, it would be Cameron Thomas who would redeem himself for the lost tackle that led to the opening score, as he would clean up Allen as he tried to escape the other way, but he wouldn't have any chance against Thomas. Now as we get the ball back, we would see some great defensive effort late from Buffalo safety Terrell Bernard, as he would end up stopping Connor in the backfield twice, and he would finish his day with 8 total tackles as well. But he could not stop Connor forever, as he would end this drive by fighting across the goal line for his third overall touchdown on this game to put us up by a whopping 30 points. We would enter our backup unit from this point and this game, and they would capitalize on this in garbage time as Stephon Diggs would find the end zone late to put a nice statement piece on his day, which ended with totals of 5 catches for 80 yards. Then our backup offense got to take the reins, and that meant Cordero Patterson would get the handoff, and he would take this one across the goal line for yet another touchdown to punch in our final score of the game. And then, as we neared the end of the game, and Buffalo tried to put something positive together for pride, it would be the duo of Foloronzo Fatukasi and Myjai Sanders who would combine for another sack as the clock hit 0 to bring an end to this game. Now that we finished covering our game, we can take a look at other games that went on around the league this week. Starting with our Thursday night football matchup as the Seahawks would come away with a big-time road win against the Vikings as they follow up the loss we gave them with another here, and Seattle stays right on our tails. This was a very defensive game, as can be seen with Kirk Cousins only mustering 116 yards in this game. But on the opening drive, they would be able to use Devin Singletary's 50 yards to get into field goal range, and then they would call on Will Lutz to nail a 36-yard field goal to give them the opening score. Minnesota would do an incredible job keeping Seattle in check for the remainder of the first quarter behind Danielle Hunter's 10 solo tackles, with 2 being behind the line. But then, as he moved into the second quarter, the Seahawks could not be held back any longer as they would drive down the field behind Kenneth Walker's 85, and then from 2 yards out, they would give it to their fullback, Adam Prentice, for the touchdown to take the lead. And they would follow it up as Jason Myers would nail a 33-yard kick to put them up by 7. The second half began with an absolute stalemate, as this is when Harrison Phillips began to take over, as he would end with 5 TFLs, slowing down the Seattle run game. And then, as he moved into the fourth quarter, the Vikings would get themselves into a goal-to-go situation, and they would give it to the 29-year-old Leonard Fournette, which would tie this game up here. So with time running out on a tie game, Geno Smith would start to emphasize the passing attack, as his main target was DK Metcalf, who got over the 70-yard mark, and then he dumped it off to his backup running back Zach Charbonnet, who broke the play wide open to take it 20 yards for the touchdown score, and that would be enough to find them the win. Then on Sunday, during the 4 o'clock matchups where the winless Rams came into San Francisco to take on their division rival Niners, and LA surprisingly got into a very hot start as their rookie QB Curtis Atkins was on fire, tossing the rock all over with Cooper Kupp being his leading receiver with 85 yards. But he would end up throwing in a touchdown to his draft classmate receiver, Nigel Judge, and then they would follow that up as Cam Akers would punch in a second to go up by 14. But then the 49ers showed why they are one of the most prolific offenses in the history of the NFL, starting with Christian McCaffrey. He would rush for 57 yards and get them their first score to get them back into this game. And then Brock Purdy took over the passing game as he threw for over 300 yards and 5 passing touchdowns, with the first going to Deebo Samuel to tie this game up at 14-all. The Niner defense got into it as well, as Arik Armstead would pick up 1 sack, and the former Defensive Player of the Year, Nick Bosa, completely dominated the Ram O-line as he finished with an impressive 4 sacks. This pressure started to get to the rookie quarterback as he would end up throwing an interception to Talanoa Huafunga, who would set them up on the goal line with a 21-yard return, and then Purdy would rifle in a touchdown toss to Brandon Ayuk to give them the lead heading into the half. San Fran would once again get the ball to start the half, and he would once again find Ayuk for a touchdown score to double their touchdown connections on the day. Down 2 scores, LA would get the ball back, but Akers would have a brutal mistake as he would fumble the ball as Niner corner Diamador Lenore would punch the ball out and hop on top of it to set San Fran up with some great field position. We would reward him for the turnover as CMC would bring in a receiving score to make this a 3-score game. The Rams would attempt to keep their chances alive in this game as they put together a drive to start the 4th, which would end in Akers bringing in his own 4-yard receiving touchdown to bring it right back to a 14-point game. But San Fran would chew this clock down, and McCaffrey would get the ball as a receiver once again, and he would once more find the end zone for the 3rd time to shut this game down. And then in our primetime Sunday Night Football game, we had an NFC East rivalry with 2 of the top teams in the NFC as the Eagles went into Jerry World to take on the Cowboys. Dallas got the ball first, and with Tony Pollard out with an injury this week, they looked to the rookie back Jabari Hill, who would finish his day just under 50 yards and would punch in the opening drive score. Philly would look to respond, and the pass rush would bring the heat early, led by Micah Parsons, who finished with 11 total tackles, with 2 of them being TFLs. But Hurts would do well getting out of the pocket as he would run for 34 yards, and that would set up Jake Elliott for a 53-yard field goal, which he would nail to narrow the margin to 4. Then we would have a bit of a back and forth in the second quarter as Dallas would get the ball back and Dak Prescott would start to take over as a passer as he would target CeeDee Lamb, who finished with over 130 yards, and he would bring in the next score. Ball would go back to the Eagles, and they would continue their ground game focus as DeAndre Swift would punch in a rushing score. Dallas's offense would stall, and the Eagles would run the clock down and allow Elliott to kick a second field goal to make this an 8-point game as they went into the half. Philly started with the ball in the second half, but neither them or the Cowboys could get anything going in the third. Then we got to the fourth quarter, and they would set up Elliott for his 3rd successful field goal of the day. Dallas would match them as Kaimai Fairburn would knock through a 39-yarder to keep this an 8-point game. Jalen Hurts would then lead an incredible drive where he would find Dallas Goedert in the end zone to tie this one up against his namesake. Prescott would then step in to lead the 2-minute drill to attempt to take the win. But then disaster struck as the veteran corner Darius Slay would jump a throw intended for Lamb, and he would take it all the way back 47 yards for the pick 6 to put Philly up by a touchdown. And they would see that lead out till the end. We could then focus back on us, and our first task today was returning to the negotiation table, starting with our high potential corner Cam Edwards. Throughout this process, he has made it clear he wants to get paid for the potential we see in him. And so this week, we offered him a 2-year deal worth $6.2 million, averaging $2.1 million a year in salary, and he declines. And he said he appreciates the offer, but he is going to test free agency. And honestly, that might be the best option for him to get the most money. After that, we move over to Kaiser White. And although he is having the best season of his career, he has been demanding a lot of money. And with our trade acquisition of Marte Mapu last week, we ended up deciding to withdraw from negotiations with him. So we then moved along to his outside linebacking counterpart in Victor Dimukije. He may not get a ton of playing time, but he is a very promising backup in this league. So today, we offered him a 3-year deal worth $8.4 million, averaging $1.7 million a year in salary. And he declined as well, saying he thinks he is also going to test out free agency. So after 2 misses, we wanted to get a win on a guy who survived our trade talks in Zach Pascal. It was either him or Moore who was going to get traded, and we obviously know how that played out. So we ended up offering him a 2-year deal worth $9.2 million, averaging $2.8 million a year in salary, and he accepted, saying that's a good offer, and he's glad we got the deal done. So after finally getting one to go our way, we moved back to the defense and we got back in talks with strong safety Theo Jackson. He has another promising backup as well, and so we decided to offer him a 2-year deal worth $6.4 million, averaging $2.2 million a year in salary, and he accepted, saying he is excited to sign such a great offer and to stay with the team. Then we moved right back to the offense with James Conner, and after yet another incredible showing this past game, we have no choice but to try and bring him back for more football. So we ended up offering the veteran back a 2-year deal worth $7 million, averaging $2.5 million a year in salary, and he accepted, saying this offer is perfect, and he can't wait until next year. Another veteran that got into talks with us this week is tight end Zach Ertz. Although not a starter anymore, he is still a very solid player despite his age, and mentor presence is massive to this team. So we ended up offering him a 2-year deal worth $15.6 million, averaging $2.9 million a year in salary, and he accepted, saying he is excited to sign such a great offer and stay with the team. And this is a very cheap deal to keep him around as long as we don't cut him and face the cap hit, as he has had a lot of signing bonus on this contract. Staying with the veterans, we moved back into the secondary to discuss corner Jason Verrett. And although he has interest in re-signing, looking at his age and his already diminishing skill set, we decided to withdraw from negotiations with him. But a guy we do have interest in keeping around is, of course, right guard Will Hernandez. He is a very productive blocker for our offense, so we decided we wanted to offer him a 2-year deal worth $10.8 million, averaging $2.6 million a year in salary, and he also accepted, saying that is exactly the offer he was hoping to get, and that next season will be great. After we finished up there, Michael Wilson wanted to talk to us in the locker room, and he said, "Hey coach, I haven't been as productive as I was hoping to be this year. Having a big game might help me get back on track. What do you think?" And we responded saying, "We hear him and understand. We're going to do our best to get you involved throughout the game. Keep your head up and be ready to make some plays." And he then said, "Thanks coach, I knew you would understand and really appreciate making the extra effort to help get him more involved." And with that, the goal was set to get Michael Wilson 100+ receiving yards this week. But we could then look at the news headlines from around the league for this week, starting with how everyone is buzzing about the incredible performance James Conner put together this past game. Another guy who had a big day was Chris Godwin of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, as he flies to the top of the receiving leaders chart with 542 yards. But this past week was defined by some huge divisional matchups, starting with the Raiders upsetting the Chiefs by a score of 28-25, and that was led by a 3 rushing score performance by Josh Jacobs to take the win on the road. We also had a big-time game in the NFC North, as the Packers snuck out a very narrow win by a score of 13-10 over Detroit. And it doesn't get any easier, as now they move to this week, where they will have an extremely defensive game, as their number 1 defense heads into Minnesota to take on the Vikings' 5th-ranked defense. And then another must-see matchup to come this week involves us as we welcome New England as we take on the Patriots. And this is a team we obviously did not expect to be as familiar with, but we just did some big business with them, and it is going to put a lot of eyeballs on this game. All while this historic franchise looks to find their way back to their past success. So let's start with looking over the injury reports for this game. Starting with the Pats, they will be without their starting tight end Mike Gesicki, as he is recovering from a dislocated ankle that will keep him out for the next 2 games. And for us, our sole injury is, of course, our rookie running back Sean Jones, who continues his recovery process from the broken ribs he suffered, but he should be ready to return for next week's game. One of the Patriots' best players that will be taking the field this week is their star right guard, Mike Onwenu, and the 26-year-old does a ton for them in terms of keeping the pocket clean for their offense. And he continues to learn a ton from their center, David Andrews, a guy who is a proven leader for this team, playing in his 10th season in the NFL, a member of 2 of the Super Bowl winning teams during the Patriots dynasty, and he also will be incredibly tough to get past this week. But this team's true strength lies in their defense, starting with the best guy on that side of the ball in Kyle Duggar. He is a massive piece of this defense, as he controls a lot with his ability to crash down and play the run, and we will have to make sure he is consistently picked up in our blocking schemes. And he has learned a lot coverage-wise from their veteran corner, Jonathan Jones. He may not be the most dominant guy in the league, but he is able to truly do it all, whether he needs to slide into the slot, drop back in a zone, or play man-to-man with someone, and that type of skill set will always be useful to any team. And when you talk about unique skill sets, you have to talk about none other than Jabril Peppers. He is one of those hybrid safeties that can truly play almost any position on the field, and he has been waiting his entire career to be used properly, and maybe New England is the place to do that. But their most promising player on the entire defense has to be their second-year corner, Christian Gonzalez. They drafted him with the 17th overall pick just a season ago, and he has had a very solid rookie year, and he's looking to build on that this year, and he has thus far as he has already picked up 2 interceptions this season. But they do have a very solid veteran presence in the linebacking unit, starting with their star middle linebacker, Jawan Bentley. He is such a great anchor holding down the middle of the field primarily against the run, and we saw that last year as he racked up 135 total tackles. And on the outside, providing pass rush is their aging superstar, Matthew Judon. He may not be at the peak level he previously had, which brought him to the Pro Bowl on 4 separate occasions, but he continues to produce at his age, and he is going to cause problems for our offensive line this week. But the player the focus of this game will revolve around will be our former receiver, Rondale Moore. The small, speedy receiver showed so much promise when he was in games last year, but with the emergence of KJ Hamler, he was relegated to the bench, and he is just too good to sit. So now he gets his shot at getting his career back on track with the Patriots, and he's going to look to have a big game against us this week. And just as we thought, he has already signed his big extension as he got a 3-year deal worth $31.5 million. Overall as a team, New England's offense is extremely average throughout, whether it be through the pass or the run, and they don't have any super impressive players to watch out for. And on the defensive side, it's a similar story, but they do have a bit more star power there and a lot more hope for what they can end up becoming on that side of the ball. Now that we know who we will be going up against, it is time to set our game plan for this upcoming matchup. Starting on defense, we are going to defend the outside run. This is a team that likes to keep it simple, handing the ball off and running, and we need to shut that down quick to make them uncomfortable. And on offense, we're going to counter the blitz. This team does not have a lot to lose, and because of that, they like to blitz the 3rd most across the entire league. So if we can handle that, we should have a pretty good shot to make some things happen. With that, we can then set our game day goals. Following the Michael Wilson receiving goal, we want to win by 17 plus points. This is a team that I believe is worse than their record suggests, much like Minnesota was, and this would be a great opportunity to show them what a real contender looks like. Next, we want to get 300 plus offensive yards. This is a bit less than we usually aim for, but we do have to respect their ability on defense, but I also still believe we come out on top in that matchup. After that, we want to allow 14 points or less. This offense has very little going for it, and we need to prove our defense is of playoff caliber by having a massive shutdown performance this week. And lastly, we want to get an interception. If we can fulfill our game plan to shut down the run, we can force them to throw the ball, and at that point, bring the true test to Mac Jones. We then proceeded to training for the week, and we got some very unfortunate news as both of our starting tackles ended up getting injured. First was Paris Johnson Jr., who suffered a hip pointer, and the rookie, Gary Fordham, dislocated his wrist. So they will both be out this week, but they should be good to return next week. So, Josh Wells will take over the starting right tackle duties, and then we needed to open up a roster spot. So with the trade acquisition of Marte Mapu, that allowed us to designate our second-year middle linebacker Owen Popo to the practice squad. Then we moved to free agency and signed the former Pro Bowl left tackle Eric Fisher, which not only covers us for this week, but also provides us some good depth at tackle. But on a more positive note, we did get some solid progression this week from one of our key players in KJ Hamler. He has been a great number 2 receiver, and his play was so good that he ended up forcing us to trade Rondale Moore. And this week, he improved in his awareness, catching, and release. And with that, we've discussed everything we have needed to for this week. If you guys enjoyed, remember to like, comment, subscribe, turn those notifications down below, and I will see you all next week as we stay home to take on the New England Patriots.